My husband died in the sea while saving his white moonlight. By the time I was notified, his body had almost been devoured by fish. The staff asked if I still wanted to retrieve it. With a wave of my hand, I firmly refused to waste public resources. With the certificate issued by the police, I directly cancelled my husband's household registration. After contacting his lawyer, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. In the middle of the night, I opened a bottle of champagne. Originally, I could only get half of the property, but now I can get 2/3. I must celebrate. My husband Nathan is dead. He took his white moonlight Mandy on a ferry cruise, encountered waves, the boat hit a reef, he gave the survival opportunity to Mandy, but he himself died in the sea. When the police notified me, he had been gnawed by sharks to the point where his head was gone. The headless body was floating on the water surface. Originally, a few fishermen wanted to retrieve him, but then another shark came, grabbed him, and swam away. So they only salvaged Nathan's wallet and phone. As a prominent entrepreneur in this city, everyone wanted to find his body. The police asked if I needed a rescue team to retrieve it. With a wave of my hand, I said, "No need," firmly refused to waste public resources. An hour later, I took the certificate from the police to cancel his household registration. The staff saw his ID and shed 2 tears. "Mr. Nathan was a great person, madam, please accept my condolences." I laughed out loud. She was right, Nathan was a great person. Originally, in 2 days, he was going to get a divorce certificate with me and a marriage certificate with Mandy. But he died, leaving me a large inheritance. Without a body, I could only burn some of Nathan's things to serve as ashes. So I burned the useless waste paper from his company office, plus his daily necessities. After burning, I put the ashes into a plastic bag, thinking of buying an urn tomorrow. I contacted the lawyer and began to liquidate Nathan's property: 6 companies, 8 cars, 66 storefronts, 88 houses, plus gold bars in the bank, and funds and stocks in hand. While I was calculating how many zeros all this amounted to, the lawyer told me, among them, 2 properties were transferred to Miss Grace by Mr. Nathan while he was alive. What? I won't allow others to ruin my auspicious numbers. I turned to ask the lawyer, the things Nathan gave her, I should be able to recover them, right? As expected from a lawyer earning millions annually, he got it immediately. That day, Nathan's water-damaged phone had its data restored, and in the afternoon, my lawyer's letter was express delivered to Mandy's home. When Mandy arrived, I had just opened a bottle of champagne. She directly picked up the glass and splashed it at my face. "Maggie, what do you mean by sending that lawyer's letter?" I dodged to the side, and the liquid from the glass fell entirely onto the carpet. My Italian handmade carpet. I looked at Mandy with a pained expression. "This counts too, compensate me for it all together later." "Who gave you the courage to ask me for these things?" "These were all given to me by Nathan. We're about to get married, these are all mine." "Miss Grace, do you understand the law?" I sneered. "The things Nathan gave you belong to marital community property. I have the right to demand their return." Mandy's face turned pale. She took out her phone. "You definitely didn't discuss this with Nathan. I'll call him now. Just wait, he won't let you off." Seeing this, I laughed out loud. "Don't call, it won't go through. Nathan is in a shark's belly." Mandy's eyebrows and eyes twisted together. "Maggie, you're too vicious. After all, you two were husband and wife. Do you have to curse him like this?" I waited for her to finish shouting, then took out Nathan's ID, cut into 2 pieces, from my bag. "What? You don't believe it? This is his ID, just cut this morning." Mandy looked at the 2 halves of the ID, stunned for a moment, still unbelieving. "You must be playing some trick. I'll call him now, and you won't get a cent of the money." She dialed a few numbers on her phone, and soon the phone in my bag rang. I took out Nathan's phone from my bag. The screen was flashing the words "wife." Mandy's face turned ashen in an instant. "Why is his phone with you?" "I told you he's dead." "Then where's the body?" "Eaten by sharks." I spread my hands. "Miss Grace, did you forget that you 2 went on the cruise together? How come only you came back?" I thought. Mandy squatted down directly, her whole body starting to tremble, her eyes turning red instantly, tears falling like pearls. I couldn't help but roll my eyes. My Italian handmade carpet, tears are dirty too, you know. Mandy cried for a while, then suddenly stood up and ran towards the pillar in the living room. Nathan, I'll die with you. Scared, I quickly stepped back a few paces, picked up my phone, and dialed. Comrade police, come quickly, someone is attempting suicide in my home. The police arrived soon, understood the situation, and took Mandy away. As she was leaving, I didn't forget to remind her, remember to return my things, or I'll sue. One of the police officers turned his head to look at me, his expression seeming to say, she's like this, and you're still provoking her. I shrugged, that's millions, who wouldn't be anxious? The next day, I started planning a funeral for Nathan. After all, he has so many wealthy relatives, and in these 2 years, I've given them red envelopes. Now it's harvest time. I notified a bunch of Nathan's relatives and found a master to go with me to select a burial site for him. In the end, I didn't like the feng shui treasures the master picked, I liked the one at the very edge. Bare and barren, nothing grows there. The master said, no, if buried there, your husband's descendants will live very hard lives. I clapped my hands, that's great, this one then, such good feng shui, and cheap. Anyway, Nathan and I have no children, let alone descendants. After buying the burial plot and urn, I found a funeral company and held a quite dignified funeral for Nathan. At the funeral, I pretended to cry while glancing at those condolence money envelopes. As expected from wealthy people, the envelopes got thicker and thicker, so thick I almost laughed out loud. As the funeral was about to end, Mandy arrived. Dressed in black, holding a 7 or 8-year-old boy by the hand, she walked directly towards Nathan's photo. The already quiet funeral scene suddenly became even quieter, everyone's eyes and ears perked up. Zeke, Mandy's voice sounded weak, kneel down. This is your father. As the boy was about to kneel, I ran over and helped him up. Kid, you can't just recognize anyone as dad. Mandy got anxious, he is my son with Nathan. Oh. I lowered my eyelids, you say so, but I don't believe it, who can prove it? We can prove it. 2 more people appeared at the door. It was my long unseen mother-in-law and father-in-law. Maggie, you bitch. As soon as my mother-in-law saw me, she pounced, my son died, and you notified everyone but us, what are your intentions? How could I let her hit me? I stepped back, waved my hand, and immediately someone came to stop her. I said from the side, Mom, wasn't it you who told me not to contact you unless I died? It seems my mother-in-law forgot. That year, she drove me out of the house and said that to me. You poisonous woman, my son must have been killed by you. You did such despicable things for money, you won't die well. My mother-in-law kept charging towards me, probably wanting to scratch my face. Fortunately, the bodyguards I hired were strong, holding her tightly without leaving any gap. Mom, you don't know how Nathan died, do you? He was with Grace. Zeke, come quickly and call Grandpa and Grandma. Mandy directly interrupted me, pulling the child over. My mother-in-law immediately bent down to touch the child's face. This is our Xiong family's grandson, he looks exactly like Nathan when he was little. Saying that, she looked at Mandy, Mandy, you've worked so hard these years, raising the child alone. Watching this family recognition scene, I felt a bit nauseous. I kindly reminded, Mom, you believe whatever she says, we don't even know whose child this is. Upon hearing this, Mandy got angry, Maggie, are you saying this child isn't Nathan's? I tell you, this child is mine and Nathan's. When we broke up, I was already pregnant, and these years I've been living with the child. My mother-in-law chimed in, this child is obviously our Xiong family's seed, you bad woman, can't have children yourself, and jealous of others having children. Seeing my mother-in-law fully on her side, Mandy became bolder. She started crying about how hard it was to raise the child these years, saying how much discrimination a single mother faces. Oh, is that so? I mercilessly exposed her. How come I heard you married someone abroad and were dumped for cheating? You're farting. Mandy, teary-eyed, turned to my mother-in-law. I can endure myself, but the child without a father is really pitiful. My mother-in-law was also moved and cursed at me. Maggie, you hen that can't lay eggs, you haven't been a mother, you wouldn't understand. I understand, Mandy. I said faintly, Mom, even if this child is really Nathan's, there needs to be evidence, otherwise, anyone bringing a child could claim to be your grandson, and you'd recognize them all? I have evidence. Mandy straightened her back. Initially, Nathan didn't believe Zeke was his child, so he did a paternity test. Now that paternity report is still in his office drawer. Mom, go look and you'll know. Yo. It hasn't even started yet, and she's already changed her address. Not just me, everyone present, one by one, had expressions that became very intriguing. This funeral is really lively, everyone came for it. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law quickly sent someone to Nathan's office to fetch that paternity report. I blocked again. Mom, let's talk about this after the funeral. With so many people here, making a scene wouldn't look good. My mother-in-law snorted coldly. What? Maggie, are you afraid that once the paternity report comes out, this child can compete with you for the inheritance? I tell you, be more generous. If I were in your position, I'd definitely recognize Zeke. Couldn't persuade her, absolutely couldn't. After Mandy gave the specific location of the paternity report, someone quickly went to Nathan's company. I also took the opportunity to make a phone call. In less than half an hour, that person returned. As soon as she saw him, Mandy went up. How is it? Did you get it? The person looked troubled. No. How is that possible? Mandy screamed. Did you not search properly? I turned the place upside down, the people at the company said. The person answered while glancing at me. Don't be afraid of her. My mother-in-law saw the clue. What did the company people say? They said Madam had already burned those things. Oh, blame me. I stepped forward. I was afraid of being reminded of him by his things, so I burned all of Nathan's stuff, but I didn't see any paternity report inside. Mandy's face darkened, and she pounced directly at me to hit me. Maggie, you poisonous woman. You did it on purpose. You don't want my son to return to the Seong family. Her appearance was terrifying, scaring my bodyguards to quickly stand in front of me. Mandy, don't act like a mad dog, not to mention I didn't see that paternity report. Even if I did, how do you prove it's real? You didn't even retrieve Nathan's body, how can I prove it's real? Mandy shouted at the top of her lungs. Maggie, you're really a petty person, you want to monopolize Nathan's inheritance. My mother-in-law originally didn't know that Nathan died in the sea because I refused to retrieve him. With her crying like this, everyone knew. My mother-in-law's face darkened. Why didn't you retrieve my son? You couldn't even let him rest in peace. On what basis do you inherit his property? On the basis that I'm his wife. I smiled. Mom, why are you speaking for an outsider? She is my grandson's mom, she's not an outsider. You can't even lay an egg, you're the outsider. Return my son's money. Mom. I called to the frantic mother-in-law. Do you know why I haven't had children all these years? Isn't it because you've done too many bad things and can't give birth? Indeed, can't give birth. I sneered coldly, but the one who can't is not me. What do you mean? My mother-in-law was stunned. Could it be my son? Yes, it's Nathan who can't. I clapped my hands, and immediately someone handed me a file bag. Family scandals shouldn't be aired. I originally didn't plan to say it, but you keep forcing me, so I can only apologize to Nathan. Inside are his medical reports from the past 10 years. 10 years ago, he lost his fertility. How could Mandy have a child with him? My mother-in-law opened the file bag, and the papers fell out. Mandy picked up the papers, looked them over and over, her face instantly pale, shaking her head continuously. Impossible, this is fake. There are hospital stamps on them. If you don't believe it, you can go to the hospital to verify. Mandy tried to pull my mother-in-law's hand again, but was shaken off by my mother-in-law, who was frowning at those medical reports. I pretended to shed a few tears, turned to the relatives. Sorry for letting everyone watch the spectacle. The funeral ends here, everyone can leave. As everyone left, their faces were full of joy from eating a huge melon and eagerness to share. I no longer cared about those three, put on sunglasses, and left. In a few days, I received Mandy's lawyer's letter. It was about dividing Nathan's inheritance. Mandy's child should also have a share, and Mandy had filed a lawsuit in court. In a few days, I received a notice for pre-trial mediation, asking me to arrive on time. After receiving it, I was furious. I directly called to question my lawyer. Why hasn't my lawsuit against Mandy gone to trial, but her lawsuit against me is mediating first? The lawyer explained for a long time. I didn't understand much. The gist was two systems, and it's normal for her side to be processed first. I attended the pre-trial mediation unhappily. Mandy said, "Zeke is Nathan's child." I said, "Nathan couldn't have children, I have the medical reports." "Your medical report says low sperm motility, but that doesn't mean no motility. The doctor said there's a possibility of conception." Mandy looked smug, with smiles at the corners of her eyes. "Please check the books properly next time." "Oh, so what?" I yawned listlessly. "Do you have evidence proving this child is Nathan's?" "Of course." Mandy slapped a paper on the table. "This is Zeke's paternity test with his grandfather. It proves my son has a blood relation with Nathan's father, and Nathan's father has only Nathan as a child, so Zeke is the Sion family's child." I glanced at the lawyer, who kindly reminded her, "This doesn't count." My mother-in-law slapped the table. "How doesn't it count?" "Maggie, you're too narrow-minded. This child is my son's seed. Inheriting my son's money is only right, even if illegitimate, so what? It's normal for men to have a few outside. Besides, this child is not only Nathan's but also counts as yours. Having a child is so happy." I smiled. "Mom, don't get excited. The court wants a paternity test. What is paternity?" "Father and son is paternity. Besides, Mom, don't you really know? Actually, Dad has another son?" My mother-in-law was stunned. I directly took out a paternity report. "Originally I didn't want to say it, but I didn't expect you, mother-in-law, to help an outsider. I don't want to hide for father-in-law anymore. This is what father-in-law asked Nathan to handle before. It's the paternity report for his other child with him." I took out photos and videos again. "These are photos and videos of that child. Now he and his mom Lucy live in my father-in-law's villa in the south of the city. My father-in-law goes twice a week. There are heaps of nannies and bodyguards. The chefs are all state banquet masters. I've eaten there once. TSK, that taste." The more I said, the darker my mother-in-law's face became. I didn't forget to advise her, "Mother-in-law, you must not be narrow-minded. It's normal for men to have a few outside. This child isn't just my father-in-law's, it's also yours. Having a child is so happy." I returned the words my mother-in-law said to me verbatim. My mother-in-law went completely crazy, slapped the table, and wanted to leave. I laughed uncontrollably, saying to her back, "Leaving already? The mediation isn't over yet." My mother-in-law left. Mandy saw she was at a disadvantage. She pinched her thigh with her hand, and tears fell. "Sister Maggie, I know Nathan and I did wrong by you. You have resentment in your heart, but you've seen Zeke looks exactly like Nathan. How could he not be his child? For the sake of you and Nathan being together for so many years, leave something for his child." Her words were said so pitifully that everyone in the room was somewhat moved. I began to understand why Nathan became reckless upon seeing her. This face is too suited for playing the victim. But she chose the wrong target for pity. I sneered, still the same words, "How do you prove that the child is Nathan's?" This mediation was successful because Mandy withdrew the lawsuit. Even if she didn't withdraw, there was no way, unless she retrieved Nathan from the sea, even if the King of Heaven came, there'd be no way to prove the boy is Nathan's. After returning home, I took a hot bath. After bathing comfortably, I called my aunt who works as a nanny at Nathan's dad's place. On the phone, my aunt vividly told me that after mother-in-law returned, she directly questioned father-in-law, fought with him, and threatened to make that mistress pay. Father-in-law, seeing the matter exposed, stopped pretending and directly told mother-in-law to divorce. Now he only has that one child, and he plans to give all property to the mistress's son. Mother-in-law cried, made a fuss, and threatened to hang herself at home, father-in-law directly went to Lucy's place. Mother-in-law was used to lording it over at home. My aunt and the other nannies didn't like her much, so when saying these things, my aunt laughed very loudly. Finally, my aunt asked me, "So, your father-in-law cheated, will he leave with nothing?" I told her, "Watch less TV, cheating doesn't lead to leaving with nothing." Even when Nathan divorced me and decided to give me half the property, it was because he had a conscience. I thought mother-in-law probably wouldn't divorce father-in-law. After all, he couldn't give her half the property. But what I didn't expect was that mother-in-law actually divorced father-in-law, but he had already transferred his property, so she only got one villa. Mother-in-law, unable to swallow her anger, directly stormed to father-in-law's South City villa and beat up the mistress. Unexpectedly, the mistress directly called the police. Mother-in-law spent a few days in the station, and in the end, even that villa was compensated away. Now mother-in-law barely lives on Nathan's inheritance, but it can't support her extravagant life as a wealthy madam, so I heard she's recently looking for projects, planning to invest herself and earn some pension money. Watching the excitement, my lawsuit against Mandy to return the property finally went to trial. This case had no suspense. Naturally, I won. However, a month after winning, Mandy still didn't return my money and houses. She must lack manpower to move so many things. No choice, I'm kind-hearted, so I directly found a large truck, drove over, brought a few guys to knock on the door. Mandy held the door shut. "Maggie, this is trespassing." I said, "Fine, call the police quickly, see if the police make you come out or me leave." Mandy naturally didn't dare call the police. If she did, she'd definitely be the one to go. Just as we were in a stalemate, a black stretched Lincoln stopped behind us. I looked back. Isn't this my father-in-law's car? In less than a minute, my father-in-law got out of the car. Seeing my setup, he frowned and asked, "What's going on?" "Dad, she wants to drive me away." As soon as father-in-law arrived, Mandy opened the door. She stood beside him, tears in her eyes. "Quickly control this crazy woman." I tilted my head looking at them. What a magical scene. Why is Mandy so intimate with my father-in-law? My relationship with father-in-law isn't great, but not as bad as with mother-in-law. But after hearing Mandy's words, he turned to me, "What's wrong with you? Instead of staying home properly, you come every day to bully this orphan and widow. What skill is that?" I hadn't spoken yet when Mandy said, "She wants to rob my house." I said, "How is this your house? The court has ruled for you to move out." Father-in-law got more confused the more he heard, so Mandy tearfully exaggerated the story. Father-in-law got angry. "This is my son's house, he gives it to whomever he wants, on what basis do you take it back?" I used to think it was just my mother-in-law who was unreasonable, but I never imagined my father-in-law could be even more shameless. Luckily, I'm not afraid of him at all. I rolled my eyes. This house was bought after Nathan and I married, it belongs to our marital property. He gave it to her without my consent. I can reclaim it, and the court awarded it to me. What's the use of you disagreeing? If not, we can sue again. Father-in-law was intimidated by my attitude. Mandy looked aggrieved at father-in-law. "Dad, I have no money, and if I return the money and house to her, how will Zeke and I live?" Father-in-law thought for a while, spread his hands to me. "How much?" "I'll pay for her." Hearing this, I was very surprised. I took out the ledger from my bag. Father-in-law looked page by page, finally with a livid face. "Maggie, you're poverty-stricken crazy, you even count a 1 yuan mineral water." I also acted aggrieved. "Even a small fly is meat, this money is all my hard-earned money." After father-in-law finished looking at the ledger, he directly threw it to his secretary. "Transfer the money to her later." I quickly thanked. "Thank you, Dad." "Nathan is dead, don't call me Dad." "Okay, thank you, Uncle." Father-in-law looked at Mandy and said to her, "Move to my place today, return this house to her." Mandy wanted to say something, but father-in-law glanced at her and said very dominantly, "Isn't my place better than here? Zeke is my biological grandson, even if the law doesn't recognize it, I do, my will definitely has his name." Mandy thought about it and obediently made space for me. She's not stupid, after all, father-in-law's property is several times Nathan's. I watched her happily load those things onto the car. I kindly reminded, Mandy, there's no free lunch, I advise you to think carefully before moving over. Mandy's mouth curled up wildly, you're just sour grapes because you can't have them, after all, no matter how rich Nathan is, he's just a rich second generation, how can he compare to his old man? Pity you have no child, even if the old man has an accident, you won't get a cent of the property. After Mandy finished packing everything, she generously invited me to inspect the house. I sat on the sofa without moving, suddenly asked her, Mandy, before you went abroad, you already knew you were pregnant, right? Nathan's family likes you so much, and you two loved each other so much, why did you separate? I remember when Mandy just returned to the country, Nathan didn't sleep that night, tossing and turning in bed looking at his phone, afraid of missing any message. This sentence must have touched Mandy's sore spot. She retracted her smile, her face somewhat panicked. What does this have to do with you? Nathan is dead, why are you inquiring? I smiled, nothing, just feel you'll come back begging me. Mandy laughed loudly as if hearing a joke. Who begs whom is not certain yet. Half a year later, Mandy indeed came. She knelt in front of me, hysterically, Maggie, please save my son, only you can save him. She crawled towards me, grabbing my pant leg with her hand. Nathan's dad wants to kill him and has imprisoned him, I really have no way, please help me. I sipped tea and asked, what's going on? It turns out father-in-law's current child is sick and needs a kidney transplant, but father-in-law doesn't match, Mandy's child genetically matches, so father-in-law took her to his villa. At first, Mandy thought she was rising due to her son, but the situation gradually got out of her control. Her child always had inexplicable injuries, and while walking, would encounter falling objects from height, until Mandy learned father-in-law's child needs a kidney, she understood the abnormalities during this time. She originally wanted to take the child away, but father-in-law noticed. Father-in-law used bodyguards to stop the child and directly drove her out. Then you shouldn't beg me, you should report to the police. I sincerely suggested to her. I did report, it was useless. Mandy cried saying, when police went, father-in-law's attitude became very good, even letting her take the child, but Mandy's son had been spoiled by father-in-law during this time, knowing leaving grandpa wouldn't have such a good life, and refused to leave no matter what. So I can only come to you. Mandy with tears and snot, please help us, after all, Zeke is Nathan's flesh and blood. Why should I help? This is your and Nathan's child, not mine and Nathan's. I had an attitude of it not concerning me. Unexpectedly, Mandy said, because Nathan loved you. Mandy told me that the person Nathan always loved was actually me, he wanted to divorce me and be with Mandy, doing those things to disgust me, all because he had a terminal illness. Nathan didn't have much time left, he didn't want to hold you back. Mandy recounted Nathan's love for me, but I listened without much emotional fluctuation. I knew he loved me. I also knew he was dying. After all, drinking and clubbing every day, relying on medication to maintain energy, how could he not get sick? Not taking medicine when sick, how could he not die? Nathan's annual medical reports were all fetched by me, I knew his health better than he did. So what? I sneered, should I save your son then? Mandy didn't expect me to be so cold-blooded, realizing belatedly, you don't love Nathan at all. Far from it. I hate him. Mandy despaired, no one but me could help her. She also went to mother-in-law, but mother-in-law invested recently and lost her last bit of money. She goes to father-in-law every day for money, now is the time to curry favor with him, how could she offend him? Zeke, what to do? Mom can't save you. Mandy sadly beat her chest. I watched her go crazy for a while, then spoke again, Mandy, do you remember I asked you why you separated from Nathan back then? Mandy's tears stopped, If you tell me the truth, I can consider saving your son. Mandy bit her lip, a few minutes later, as if determined, because that year, Nathan hit and killed someone. That day, Nathan took Mandy to the mountain to watch stars. On the way back, they encountered heavy rain, and Nathan hit and killed someone. That woman lay on the ground in a bloody mess. But Nathan was terrifyingly calm. He first sent Mandy home, then dealt with it. Mandy thought Nathan would go to prison for this, so the next day she broke up with him and went abroad with family help. Abroad, she didn't do well and returned, finding Nathan not only didn't go to prison but became richer. She shamelessly clung to him again. Listening to these words, my hands trembled, but my voice was terribly low. Do you know how he handled the body later? I asked Nathan. He said he compensated the family a large sum, and it was fine. Damn it, he's farting. I directly smashed the cup in my hand on the ground. Glass shards flew everywhere. Mandy looked at me astonished, as if understanding something in an instant. Mandy, help me with something, and I'll get your son out for you, how about it? Mandy looked at my gloomy face and stepped back, but finally nodded. 2 days later, Mandy went to the police station and reported that Nathan had once hit and run. The police just filed the case upon hearing. After all, Nathan was dead, and even if not reported then, they didn't know how to investigate. However, that night, heavy rain fell, and a pile of white bones washed out from the mid-mountain of Tua Mountain. After police confirmation, this pile of bones belonged to a rural woman named Joan at the foot of Tua Mountain. 8 years ago, her family reported her missing, and this pile was only part of her body. This case was major. The city specially formed an investigation team. Later, someone went to the Public Security Bureau, saying 8 years ago on a rainy day, they saw a car hit someone on Tua Mountain and leave. Although heavy rain, they remembered the license plate. The police checked the number. The car's owner 8 years ago was the city's outstanding entrepreneur, Nathan. 2 weeks later, Nathan's parents were arrested for helping their son hit and run and cruelly handling the victim's body. They threw the body parts to the mountain, river, and garbage dump respectively. Too much time had passed, only the mountain body remained. Thus, all truth came to light. And 2 days later, I went to the Public Security Bureau to collect Joan's ashes. Holding the urn, I sobbed uncontrollably. At this time, someone else came. A woman dressed in black sat beside me. She reached out to touch the urn, tears falling too. Mom, your daughters have avenged you. I looked at Lucy's face, lips trembling, called her, sister. Lucy hugged me, stroking my back. It's all over. Joan was my mom. That year, Dad Henry, heavy rain outside, Mom went out to find a doctor. But once out, she never returned. Dad also died in the hospital without timely treatment. Suddenly, our family's sky collapsed. After burying Dad, my sister and I searched everywhere for Mom. Finally heard someone once saw a luxury car hit my mom. When asked, that person said he saw, maybe not. I knew he was afraid of trouble. So using some legal means, sister found out the car's license plate. We investigated and investigated, traced to Nathan. From the beginning, I married Nathan to investigate Mom's death truth. So I didn't care what kind of person he was, didn't care about him with other women. Lurking for 2 years, from Nathan's sleep talk, I finally pieced together Mom's whereabouts. I wanted to sue him but had no evidence. So sister started contacting Nathan's dad. Nathan deserved to die. Even if not lost in the sea, he'd die from illness. If not illness, I'd eventually send him to prison. Finally, the Seong couple was sentenced to death. The remaining Seong property was fully inherited by sister's child. Sister's child ultimately didn't find a suitable kidney source and died in the spring of the 2nd year. After knowing this news, long unseen Mandy jumped out again. Holding the previous paternity report, she kept saying her child is related to the Seong family, demanding a share of the property. Unfortunately, sister isn't me. Competing for property with sister requires strength. Sister wouldn't indulge Mandy that much. She just said one sentence, and Mandy, this crazy woman, quieted down. You really think your son's injuries then were done by old Seong? Heard he's just settled in elementary school. How about finding him some trouble? Mandy paled. Now it's a rule of law society. What can you do? Can't do much, just make you disgusted. Bullying a child, what skill is that? Fine, bully you. Sister spread her hands. Your family isn't as rich as mine. bankrupting your family is easy. Mandy now eats and lives at her parental home. Upon hearing this, her face turned ashen. No matter how unwilling, she could only obediently leave. But I'm very vengeful, so I contacted Mandy's ex-husband far abroad. Mandy's previous divorce wasn't because she cheated, it was because her ex gambled away all her money. I accidentally revealed to her ex that Mandy now lives at her parental home, and her parental home is quite rich. The next day, her ex returned to the country. Didn't hear much about the rest, only know later Mandy and her ex were both driven out of the home. On the anniversary of our parents' death, my sister and I went up the mountain to pay our respects. We combined their graves, which was also our father's last wish. The weather was beautiful that day, it didn't rain. After we kowtowed, a gust of wind blew. The wind carried an unknown wheat fragrance, Mom's scent. I think, perhaps Dad brought the lost mom to visit us.